So we ran a Twitter poll a little while ago, Chris, and we got some really interesting results, a lot of really cool comments, and we decided why not shoot a roleplay chat discussion about it.
Let's do it. Cue the music. Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to Roleplay Chat.
We are two game masters who just can't stop talking about role-playing games.
And today we talk about one-on-one games. This came up after a poll you did, Matt, about how people, like, do they play one-on-one game? Do they like it? Have they DM'd it? Played it as a player? And turns out we're kind of surprised by the results.
Yeah, I mean, I for one am very surprised. I think we had something like 30% of the people who voted said they had never played, and everybody else had either game mastered before or played as a player, which to me was shocking. I thought that a lot less people would say that or I thought more people had never played one-on-one games before. 30% is to me not very high at all. Like, I was really shocked by that.
You were expecting probably like 50%?
Yeah, half, more than half. Me as a player, I hadn't been introduced, or as a game master, hadn't been introduced to one-on-one games until I played with you, which was, I want to say 7 years into my gaming, I don't call it career. This isn't a career for us yet, guys.
No.
But yeah, you know, I hadn't played one-on-ones before. I haven't even considered playing them before that. So to me, to see so many people say that they game mastered them, played them with their children, their wives, or their husbands, or what have you, it was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I actually didn't take the time to be surprised, I guess. Like, I did not know, I had no idea what to expect, basically. And it was very interesting to see that poll for that reason, because I've played a lot of one-on-ones. Like, most of the games I've played were one-on-ones, so I'm not shocked to see people played it. But I think the thing that surprises me more is, yeah, that 30% is surprising when you think about a lot of people answering were playing Dungeons and Dragons. And to me, I have a hard time seeing Dungeons and Dragons played on a one-on-one, and maybe we'll go deeper into that subject as we have the discussion. But yeah, that's what led us to have this discussion today. And also it links pretty well with the roleplay chat we had a couple of weeks ago, the last roleplay chat we had, which was talking about how we deal with absence, like if we don't have all our players.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it last time, you know, how you could use one-on-one games when people can't make it. But I will dig into it a lot more in today's episode. We're actually going to also talk about a few other things. We're going to be talking about things like the things we like about one-on-ones, the strengths that it has, obviously the weaknesses that it has, and then situations where you should use it, how to use it, tips for using it, blah, 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 that kind of stuff.
Perfect. So maybe let's start with, we prepared a couple of questions, well, actually 4 or 5, just to direct the discussion here. We don't exactly know where we're going with this.
We never know where we're going.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of this, right? The point is to have the discussion and discover our opinions about it with you guys. And if you have comments, it would be great to continue the discussion in the comments below or on Twitter. We'll
do all that stuff.
All right.
So yeah, I think we're ready to start this convo, Chris.
I'm ready, Matt.
Let's roleplay chat. You're drinking. You can't be drinking when we're doing the intro thing.
Let's do it.
Okay, I think I'm ready, Chris.
I'm ready, Matt.
Let's roleplay chat. Let's start by talking about some of the pros and some of the cons that one-on-ones offer. When we're done talking about that, we're going to move ourselves towards really how to elevate your one-on-ones. It's going to be, I think, really cool. We're going to have some very, very fun and creative things that you can add to your one-on-one sessions. But first, let's go through the basics. Chris, what do you think are the biggest strengths of one-on-one games?
For me, the biggest strength, the thing I love the most about it, is the way that it's really intimate between you and the game master. I played a lot when I was a kid with my older brother, who introduced me to role-playing games. So for me, it has an emotional anchor in the way I started. So I played many, many games, and that created a bond with my brother that I'm not sure I would have without it. And I don't think it's overstatement of it, because me and my brother, I feel there was a lot of competition between the two of us. He was 5 years older. He was playing better at sports, better in video games, better at everything. But role-playing games were the one time we were actually cooperating. Like he was still hindering me because he was the game master in his, but it was still something we would do together. And that's one of the things.
Sorry, if you hear my daughter screaming, we just got in from a flight yesterday from Germany. She's exhausted. It's bedtime for her now, but really it's like what? I don't have to watch. What, noon? 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
So, sorry. We'll just keep filming, though.
Yep.
So you were saying your brother, you love him.
Yeah.
Because of role-playing games.
Yeah, just because of that. So anyway, it was a great bonding experience. And I think that's one of the strengths of one-on-ones. It's because it's just you and the game master. There's certain relationship where this one-on-one actually makes the game better. And we've seen it on Twitter. Some people were saying I play a lot with my kid, and that like it's almost a private time that you have with your kid. Or I play with my wife. So that strong of a bond might be a good reason to play one-on-one. If you add more people, it kind of changed the dynamic of the situation.
I think one of the biggest pros, to be completely honest, is just how much story can be developed in a one-on-one game. It's not even comparable. You know, when you're playing just you and the game master, you can really dig into your character's background. You can really move along the plot so much faster in the direction you want to take as a player or as a game master. You know, you can really work together and get the story going. In the one-on-one game that we had together, you know, Diedrich, my player, my wizard, went and did a test. He met the high capitular, or I forget what her name is, but he met someone very important in the School of Magic. He had a ceremony. He graduated. He got all kinds of cool gifts and props and clothing and stuff. All this stuff wouldn't have been really doable with other people there.
For sure, and it took like 3 hours, and it would have taken 9. I don't know, like maybe not 9, but you know what I mean. Like, it's way quicker.
It's a lot faster. The story really moves along, which is a big strength that you can find in one-on-ones. And I guess I'll toss along to you, Chris, to talk about another strength, given that you love one-on-ones so much.
Yeah. So something that I really like, and also the way we used it with the Diedrich campaign, and we saw it in the Twitter poll, was the way you can teach using that one-on-one. So in the Diedrich experience, I used it to teach you how the magic system works, because you hadn't used really your magic at this point. And that way, when you joined the party, it was really like you were ready to use the system.
Yeah.
So teach you about the mechanics, but also teach you about the lore. When you said you took the test, in the test there were stuff really basic for your character. So Diedrich knew that for sure, how many colleges of magic there are.
Yeah, but me as a player,
you didn't know the lore. Exactly. So for me, it was a great way to be like, okay, make the roll. He knows that clearly. He knows that there's 8 colors of magic, 8 colors different, and I would give a little summary. So that way I align your knowledge with the knowledge of your character. So it's a way to teach the player stuff that the character might already know.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I, for one, was very surprised to see that so many people like using one-on-ones as a teaching opportunity. And now that we talk about it, it kind of, it's a good chance. You know, one-on-one with your game master, you really get to be unashamed of the questions you have about the rules or how to use a certain system or background information that you think you ought to know. Now's the chance to ask that information. On the other side, there's still a small part of me that isn't entirely convinced that it's a strength, because it depends so much on your playstyle as a player. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later when we just talk about general considerations, but it's just something I wanted to really put in there now.
There's other pros. We will discuss a lot more, so for now, let's keep it to that. We can maybe talk a little bit about the cons. So
I'll go, because I have a list of cons. No.
Yeah.
So really, to me, the biggest con, and it will always be front and center, is that you don't have other players to feed off of. And this, I could talk about this forever. I won't, for your sake, and for even my sake, because I don't have all day. But really, having other people there is so much fun. It's why I play role-playing games. You know, to have those improvised role-playing conversations about silly things or about deep, dramatic things can be so much fun. And yes, you can do that with an NPC, but it only goes so far. A game master is only so creative. If you have 3, 4, 5 other people at the table with you, their creativity can be fed into the story, fed into the tactics of the combat, and really explore so many other solutions to problems that you just can't achieve when you're just by yourself. And that's, to me, the biggest weakness.
It's massive, and we talked about the pros. We're gonna talk about the opportunity that it arises when you play one-on-one, but that's really the cost you're gonna pay, right? The cost you're gonna pay is this creative environment that more people bring in any kind of improv situation. So moving on from that main aspect of like the main con, I think one thing I have trouble with is the versatility of having the group there. So if we talk about D&D, there's multiple classes that covers an array of competency. If you want to run a one-on-one, if you only have the rogue, you're kind of limited to that kind of interaction with the world, where if you have a rogue, a fighter, a paladin, and a ranger, then you cover your bases, and you don't have to be that careful as a player or as a game master.
In one thing, right? Like when you have a group of people, you can say, I'm going to be the guy that's super charming, and I can flirt with everybody and get what I want. But when it comes to a fight, I'm going to suck. Well, when you have to be the only person you can count on, you kind of have to round your edges out, right? Maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe the system also isn't built for it. But that's
why I talk about D&D. The other system might be like less restrictive when building the group like that. But that's definitely something to take into consideration.
And then the last con that we're going to talk about here is, again, sort of related to Spotlight. I know we keep coming back to it, but if I was a new player and you told me, hey, do you want to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons or any other role-playing game? Why don't you come over? We'll hang out, just me and you. If I don't know you very well, I might be really awkward. It's not going to be a good time for either of us because I can't really be myself around you as a person, let alone, opening up the walls to do full-on roleplay. That might be hard.
Starting to get into a role-playing game is really awkward. Like it's an awkward experience. So it's good to be on the sidelines a little bit when you start. So that kind of removes that opportunity. My wife is exactly like that. When I introduced her to role-playing game using one-on-ones because that's how I learned. She was feeling really awkward, and even though she's my wife, she was always asking me like, what should I do? What are my options? And I think that's normal question for new players. But if you see people play, then you can grab the idea of it without having to feel that pressure and that awkwardness of role playing or just coming up with creative ways.
Like always being the one with the solution, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You always have to be feeding in, not necessarily the right answer, but an answer. And it can be hard. It can be exhausting, and it can be intimidating if it's your first time playing, or you're a player who just doesn't really enjoy being the center of attention. And you might not know that if it's your first time playing. You don't know what you like, what you don't like, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I think that covers the pros and cons. Let's move on to the next part. We're just going to briefly touch upon some general things to consider that kind of aren't really pros, aren't really cons, but just good to know information about running one-on-ones. And then if you stick around, we're going to go into some really fun, really interesting things you can do to take your one-on-ones to the next level.
Yeah. So for your consideration, take into account planning. Planning is a bit different when you use a one-on-one because the players, because they're specialized, like we were saying before, they tend to they don't have that many avenue to explore. if we take the example of the group before, the rogue, the paladin, the ranger, I don't remember what I said, the fighter. Well, if you make them attack a building,
there's a few options that they can take.
Yeah, you don't really know what they're gonna do, and you're gonna plan wide. If you only have a rogue, then you're pretty sure he's gonna sneak in. He's probably not gonna charge in with his dagger and everything, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to kind of make it more interesting. You don't want to be like just stealth check, right? You have to make it more interesting because you don't have that variety.
Variety.
I'm French. Yeah, I know. So yeah, kind of have to plan less wide,
deeper. Really.
Yeah. And the other big thing is the fact that because the story advanced so quickly, kind of have to know in advance. Attacking a facility might be a whole session with 4 players, but with 1 player, it
might be an hour.
Might be an hour and a half. Then you have to be ready to do other things.
Another thing, really just in general, not a pro, not a con, is that when you're playing by yourself as a player, the stakes tend to be a little bit higher. To take Chris's example with the rogue, if you're infiltrating a fortress all by yourself, well, guess what? If you get caught, you're caught. There's no other players to come and rescue you. Maybe there'll be like an NPC or something, but really all the weight is on your shoulders to whether this succeeds or fails. And if an NPC gets you out of jail, did you really succeed? I don't think so.
Yeah, and that's the feeling I get. I think that's very important when I play with my brother. My brother is really likes to put challenges, and it's like, okay, I remember one day I was playing in the Star Wars game, and I needed to neutralize a facility basically, and I had like multiple points to attack, but I was alone. I was like, hey, what's the order? If I get caught, the alarm sounds, it's all my fault, and it's a lot more high stakes, and
the pressure's on. That
can be very fun, but also if you don't feel like it, or you're not that kind of player, or you're tired that day, you might be like, oh, can we just hang out? Can I just see what other people want to do? So again, it's not a pro, it's not a con, it's a way of playing that kind of is part of the one-on-one experience.
I mean, if you're aware of how the stakes tend to be higher, there's nothing stopping you from having a whole session where you're just shopping with the shopkeeper.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do that if that's what the player wants. But just keep in mind that when challenges are put forward by the game master, the stake, like the ratio of the stakes to the player's actions is so much higher in a one-on-one than when you're playing in a group.
Yeah, and I feel that that's almost like implied, because if you have 4 or 5 people and your game master puts an encounter in front of you, most of the time players will assume, well, if it's in front of me, it's beatable. Like, I can beat it.
That's a whole other conversation.
But I feel like most people assume a version of that. But if you're alone and there's an encounter, I feel like people will assume they don't necessarily will be able to take this full room of people.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's almost more clear. So it's something to take into consideration when you plan your encounter. Or maybe I say it's implicit. It needs to be clear, because if you play a one-on-one and you put a regular encounter where you're like, okay, the rogue is going to sneak by, and then the rogue decides to encounter it, then because it's high stake, it's going to be a lot of consequences.
Another thing too, Chris, that maybe I'm backtracking a little bit, and I'm sorry guys, but in terms of planning, we talked about planning deeper. You also, I think, have a bigger grocery list of like NPCs, environments.
Oh yeah.
In planning deeper, you have to fill these voids of not having other people there. So I haven't really run any one-on-ones to that extent. Do you have any examples, Chris, or stories about planning like a bunch of NPCs for a one-on-one?
Yeah, I really like to use NPCs to bring the player characters out and talking, and it's even more important in a one-on-one because they won't talk to the other players. It depends on the kind of group you have, but yeah, you need to populate. And often what I'll say on one-on-one, if you go attack a facility again, you can hire mercenaries, which is probably less frequent when you have a whole group.
Yeah.
So NPCs, often I will put more details and location because they're going to be a lot more detail oriented when exploring a place, because that's the only thing they do.
It's that's the not the fun, but like that's what they're doing. If you're playing one-on-one, you're looking around, you're investigating, you're talking to NPCs, because there's no players to
and
fill the gap.
and it's like once they're investigating in a room, something that I like to do in a combat, let's say, is while they have a combat, the other ones are doing investigation or some other kind of activity. Well, when you're only one character, you don't have that,
No
right?
flexibility for that.
So it's more about, okay, now we're in combat, now we're investigating, now we're role playing, where you don't have that kind of mash.
I guess you could still do it, but you have to be, again, conscious of the differences. Cool. I think that really sets our stage for the part that I'm the most excited to talk about. So, we've established the pros, the cons, and the general things that you need to know when running a one-on-one. But how do you take your one-on-one to the next level? How do you make sure that your one-on-one isn't just role-playing with two people? It's more. How to take advantage of the strengths that one-on-ones have. I don't. My sentence just kept going there. So let's start with you, Chris. What is one of the things, the opportunities that arise with one-on-ones that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's a really it would be a lost opportunity to not do it, is to tailor-made what your adventure is to the player that's in front of you. If depending on whose friend I'm playing with, or if it's a kid, or if it's my wife or whatever, I'll tailor-made the story to that player. So the three pillars of, let's say, D&D, for example, is combat, exploration, and role play.
Yeah.
You can you can put the proportion of these three in the way you want. So if I play with you, maybe I'll put more role play, some exploration, and a little combat. Where if I play with another one of our player who plays Novak, I would probably put a lot more of combat, exploration, and maybe role play a little bit less.
Yeah, or less planning or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's like, okay, you infiltrate this and plan, otherwise you get screwed. Some people like planning. Some people like just shopping. Obviously, that's not really planning an adventure, but you know what I mean. So it's really you get to tailor-made for your public.
Yeah, and when you're playing, you're planning for a group. You still, you tailor for your group. But here it sounds obvious, but really you can make the game exactly what that player wants out of the game. Obviously, no player actually knows what they actually want out of a game, myself included. But at least you can try your best, like Chris said.
So what else?
Another really interesting tip. Let me just make sure I'm saying it right. Yeah. So something that happened when we did our one-on-one is you used the one-on-one as an opportunity to really meld what my character knows and what me as a player knows in the universe.
Yeah.
So you're really bringing me in a situation where I get a bunch of information that I ought to know, that none of the other players ought to know, and I get to be privy to all that information that's coming in, and then the next time I play with everybody else there, I get to look like the genius who knows all about magic and who knows all about the different schools of magic and all of this and that. So really taking the opportunity to use your one-on-one to give your player this insight onto a topic that their character should know, but that maybe the other characters shouldn't know.
Yeah, and that can be expanded to a lot of things. Like we're talking about this lore, but something we could do is once you go back to your family, maybe we know you have a family, but it's not fleshed out.
Yeah.
And so a way of giving you information that your character should know is, okay, you meet your sister, and we take that one-on-one opportunity to give you information about the sister, and there's different ways to do it. But what's important here on the one-on-one is you'll know more about your sister than the rest of the group.
Yeah.
And that's really cool for you, and it makes it's once you go back to the group, it's going to make it even more fun when
and it's realistic, right? The character would know more about their sister than random adventurers that you're partied up with.
And if we can do a little like side note here, we've talked in the past in the video of creating cool NPCs, like how to make them interesting.
Yeah.
We talked about the fact that sometimes you can actually ask the player for details about your NPCs, and I think that's a perfect situation to do it.
Yeah.
Like let's say Diedrich goes back to his hometown and meets his sister. I could be what I call pulling a Matt, because you do that a lot. It's like, okay, Matt, what is great about your sister? What's the quality you like the most? And maybe what's one secret you know about your sister that your parents don't know?
Mm-hmm.
And then you know that it might be important to the story, might not be. That's again a tool you give to the game master. But then once you
group back up with everybody else, you now have this information, and you also create a bond with that NPC, like we mentioned in another video, that you can't really replicate. If me as a person, as a player, I was involved in the creation of this NPC, I immediately become invested in that NPC. So in the situation where you're making me talk about my sister, well, if you want me to be invested in my sister as a character, as a player, give me that opportunity to help you build the lore of that NPC. And again, you're tailoring that to me as a player, because I love doing that. I love having a say in different elements of the game that go beyond just what my character is and does. Maybe don't do this tip, like we said, like in the first element. If the players that you're doing the one-on-one with doesn't want to have that kind of input, don't. But it's a really cool opportunity to try and give them the chance to be part of that collaborative character building or storytelling or what have you.
Yeah, and it's the thing that's great about it for me is when the group is back and you introduce your sister. Obviously, I think obviously you won't be like, here's my sister, here's her darkest secret.
Dark secret.
Like, but you know it, and it might actually come up if the game master can use it in a clever way. You might be like 3 sessions later, you'd be like, I kind of have to tell you that, guys, because I think there's something wrong with my sister, right? And maybe you do a whole adventure on this, and that's great.
And this segues really well into the next element of one-on-ones that you can only really achieve in a one-on-one, is this element of giving your player secret information that none of the other player characters ought to know. There are ways to do that in a group. You pass them notes, you take them aside, or what have you. But when you're playing one-on-one for several hours, 2 hours, whatever, this is the perfect opportunity for you to really flesh it out, have an immersive discussion or an immersive environment or whatever, where that player character gets to discover something really eye-opening. It could be about another player character. Maybe it's a deep, dark secret of another player character, and now my player character knows. And then when we group back up, who do I tell? Do I keep it to myself? When's the right opportunity to use that information? And when I do reveal it to everybody else, I get a moment, like when you told it to me, I go like, oh my God, that's crazy. And then when I give it to everybody else, they're going to go, oh my God, that's crazy. Like it just keeps the good stuff coming more and more.
So you have a reveal moment that could have been like in front of everybody. Let's say the common way to do it would be, okay, Diedrich is in this scene and everybody else is just somewhere else. I do the reveal. Everybody's like, oh, cool, but they're not there to react to it.
Yeah.
But you're the only character who knows. And then when you tell them, the players already knew.
They can still kind of
act on it, but it's meta knowledge, right? So, but that way, when you use the one-on-one, it's a great moment. You get to have a multiple payoffs.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we call like the double reveal or even triple reveal. So it's a really cool tool that the one-on-one gives you.
And it adds another element to that too. Not only are you revealing the information on several occasions, but you add even more mystery. Why does Matt's character know this information about somebody else's character? Or why does Chris's character know this big important piece of information about the campaign that nobody else knows? Are you in cahoots with the bad guy? Like you add all these different seeds of doubt or of wow factor.
And the player can use it to build a role play and relationship with the other players. Like we said, if you have a reveal moment that could have been like in front of everybody, It could be a reveal about another player. Maybe some dark woman come to talk to one of the characters, like your companion killed my husband 10 years ago, and something like that. And we don't really know why, but then you decide to go and tell only that character what happened there. Where were you 10 years ago? What did you do? Or try to get information, and the other player doesn't even know. Like, again, as a game master, let's hope the character knows his backstory that you're using, of course, but then they don't know, like, when did he learn about that, and that can create a really cool dynamic into the group.
Yeah, maybe let's give a few more examples, because I really like this. So we have like the example of a player character's background where, you know, a mysterious woman comes and tells you something. Another example could be maybe you find letters addressed to another player character that are opened in the in room that you're sharing, and you can't help but look at them.
Wanted posters.
I
don't know.
That's cool. Yeah.
Or like you go to look for a mission and or maybe a same last name, and someone's looking for them, and you're like, oh, is it the sister? Like, it can create a whole thing, and then do they know that someone's looking for them? Let's say a wanted poster. Do they know it? Or maybe they hid it from the group. And what do you do with that information, right? So that's all about the players.
You could also take this, sorry to keep talking about the same thing here, Chris, but you could take this the other way too. It doesn't need to be bad information. Maybe you learn something really nice.
That's true.
Maybe you learn that this person's donating money to a local orphanage. Why? Are they just really nice? Or do they have a child that is in the orphanage?
I love that.
You know, like all these new pieces of information that could or could not be related to the plot of the main campaign, but really flesh out other people's player characters to you as a player. And then when you see them the next time, you have this information that you can kind of play on. Do you have any other positive examples?
Well, yeah, one that I did in the campaign. I don't want to go into too much details, but what happened? The mentor of one of the players had a really good relationship with two other players, and he revealed information about his allegiance to two of the players, and the other ones don't know. And one of the other players, it's kind of confusing here, but let's say the rogue works for that guy who revealed his allegiance to two other players. The rogue doesn't know it.
Yeah.
So once it's going to come up, he doesn't know exactly who he's working for. So, but the reveal is actually a good thing. Like, the guy is really legit.
Yeah.
So,
and you can take that, like we said, they can be an NPC, right? So you can now not only give reveals about other player characters, you can give reveals about NPCs, important NPCs or reoccurring NPCs that maybe like a shopkeeper or something. Now you know a weakness or an element of their background that you can mine as a player, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and another thing you can do in terms of reveal, we talk about players, about NPCs, but also about just the main plot, the story. If you find out something that you can bring back to the group, and maybe you want to share it to everybody because it's helpful, but maybe again you want to keep a little bit of the info for you, or just reveal it when it's appropriate to the story, or when you actually have the opportunity to gain from it. But something about the campaign that can move you forward could also have that double reveal moment.
Yeah,
that's really great about this one-on-one.
This is really cool. I can't wait to try using some of this stuff. The last tip, are we done talking about this?
I think so. I mean, we can give example all day, but I think you get the point. And it's really depends on where your story's at, right? But it's thinking of something that you know as the game master that's kind of in the backdrop, and giving it to just one player. Yeah. Because he's spending time, or she's spending time, they're spending time with you playing that day. Give them something.
Yeah, it's more than just role playing. Now they had a fun time role playing, and they know who one of the bad guys are, or they now suspect one of the good guys to be a bad guy, or whatever. We gave a bunch of examples, but like now they have this nugget of information that make it feel like, wow, doing this one-on-one wasn't only fun, but it's gonna have a payoff next time.
Yeah. All right.
That's enough about that. Let's move on to our last thing to consider to really elevate your games, And it's to really focus on the player character, right? The strength of a player character, and give them challenges that allow them to shine. You know, when you're in a group, you can already do that, but sometimes you have to cut it short.
Yeah, and you know when you're playing a game and someone is often happens when you split the party, or it happens with the rogue, or when you want to send a diplomat somewhere. Like it happens when you're like, okay, we're gonna do this thing.
Yeah.
Can you do that other thing? And you have to stop the game and manage when you split the party. You did also a poll for splitting the party, and most people were saying,
well,
yeah,
they enjoy doing it, or you know, sometimes you have to do it. And one, I can't remember who. I'm sorry, but they had an interesting perspective, which I think is very valid, where they said, you know, if someone wants to split apart by themselves, I'm not going to give them more time to shine than anybody else.
Yeah, so if I do 10, let's say 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, even if this is really intense and the other ones are, I guess, doing something else.
But I think it's even less than that. If the 4 other players has 5 minutes, this one player only has 1 minute. Because that's as much time as they would have had to shine in the group of. You know what I mean? So it's equivalent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're by yourself, but you don't get more time than if you were with everybody else.
So what if instead of doing this, you just remove that and you play a one-on-one with that character where this happens, and then you bring them back into the story later. Obviously, it's for longer splitting the party, and that's what we did against with Diedrich. He just went to give his letter, but instead of running the combat with the group, and at the same time having you doing this thing, we just like, okay, you're not in this game, but we have a one-on-one together.
Exactly.
And
I think it benefited, right? It's tailor-made to me. Nobody else is privy to that information, and they shouldn't be, right? If you're the rogue going on a stealth mission to infiltrate a castle and unlock the gate for everybody else to charge in, well, you could have everybody sit back and watch the rogue do that. You could fast forward and just make the rogue roll a stealth check and then be like, okay, you did it. Or you do a one-on-one and you really give them 2 hours of your time where they, you explore the castle, you figure out where the key is, you unlock the door, you maybe stab a guard in the back so that he doesn't sound the alarm. You really play to the strengths of that player character and allow them to shine as a player character. You still include risk. You don't want to make it like a sure success. Then it's not fun. But you give them the challenges that are appropriate.
Yeah, I remember one time in the Blood of Betrayal, it was really fun because the rogue kind of split the party, and we usually take, when we play a long time, we usually take a little break, and he split, and instead of going back and forth, I kind of finished with you guys, and then I was like, go on the break and I'll spend the break playing with just that character.
Yeah. And
it was great because you guys did not know what he went through, but once you got back to the table, chaos broke loose. I won't go into the details, but you were like, what the hell happened here?
What did you do?
and he had the payoff of having gone through this, and it was all his choice. It wasn't me saying this is happening or whatever. And it was a really great way of not having you lose your time. Again, some group don't mind having like sitting there for 45, an hour and a half of just looking at other people having their moment. But
it's a bit of both, right? It's finding that balance. And it gives that rogue now has the opportunity to explain himself to us, which is kind of fun.
And that was cool. Like after, like, what happened? Yeah. Why?
And he didn't keep. I mean, not that I know, he didn't really keep any information from us. I don't think so. So like, it doesn't always have to be big plot reveals.
No,
it can be just a small thing where he now set off an alarm and a bunch of guards are at the front gate. But he's telling us that, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think that covers all four. So let's
maybe just some examples too, like we said about the rogue a lot. I mentioned a little bit like some kind of diplomat.
Yeah, like maybe a bard has to go convince the king to give them more troops. Well, you have the bard play that scenario.
And in the next game, maybe you start like you're having a combat, and 3-4 rounds in, the bard comes back with 10 men, at his back.
A bunch of reinforcements come charging in on horseback,
And
or
then
something.
everybody gets a cool moment. It's like, oh my god, this combat was getting like way too hard. The bard comes back. He has that cool moment. Like
Yeah.
it really brings the story to a whole new level.
Another example, if you want to, we talked a lot about maybe more intellectual player character classes. What about like a brute or like a barbarian? Maybe they need to sign up into like a tournament, like a one-on-one fisticuffs tournament, duel type of situation, or maybe
A distraction.
cause a distraction in a bar or in someone's house. You have him charge in, just make a bunch of noise, and he has to fight off a couple guards. Nothing too intense, but still puts the spotlight on that character.
Yeah, another thing we did, like a prison break, right? Maybe some characters got captured,
Yeah.
and then the other ones or one person can go in and actually do the jailbreak, and then next game you start with, let's say he succeeded, secured the prisoners, and they all escape.
One other example. I'm sorry to cut you off.
go for it.
I've been reading a lot about warlocks in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, and maybe your warlock has a mysterious patron that nobody else knows about. Well, now's a cool chance for that warlock to have this one-on-one moment talking with their patron. Maybe they learn information. Maybe when they level up, you make them go see their patron and they have a conversation and they learn a new kind of spell or a ritual or whatever. So you could really do this for any kind of class or in any system too. We're using D&D examples, but there's archetypes, I think, analogous to each of these that you could really inspire yourself from.
Yeah, maybe some little things to mention is we're saying one-on-one session. Like we gave some example where we would actually stop a group game, thank you, and do a little one-on-one and then go back. And obviously you can just ask them to leave, but maybe have another, like, go play a board game, or maybe if it's shorter, just take a break. Like I said, it can be really short if you do an evening. That's what we did with Deidre. It's like a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Just come after supper. We play for 2-3 hours, and it's not a whole big deal. It's just a little thing we do together, but it enriches the story a lot. And the other thing is, we've talking about one-on-one, but it's really about being a subgroup of the whole group. Like if you're 5 people, some of the stuff we say here is applicable if you only have 2 players. Like it can also be easier to schedule. It can also be tailor-made to that 2 players. It can also have reveal for those 2 players if they can have some kind of bond to what's happening.
But the one-on-one really presents itself as this perfect opportunity. It's on a silver platter, and you want to make it more than just you role-playing with one person. You want them to leave with more. You want them to leave with something cool. And these 4 examples, I guess, or tricks or elements can really do that. We really talked about a lot of interesting things today, Chris. One-on-ones have never seemed more appealing to me than after this conversation.
I love it, but even through talking here, I find out or discovered some new aspect I could put in, especially that double reveal is really exciting to me, and just the fleshing out of the character, also using the player to give you details about NPCs in his background. It's all really really cool.
So I guess to really quickly recap, in today's episode, we talked about pros and cons. The big pro is just this opportunity you have, this intimacy you have by being just the 2 of you, the game master and the player. And one of the big cons is just the opposite, right? You don't have the rest of the party there to have fun with, to come up with cool creative solutions, to have that engagement with everybody at the table.
And it's really a balancing act. Some game master might be ready to pay that price and actually prefer one-on-ones. I think most of them don't. And if you have a comment like below that tells me otherwise, I'd like to know if you prefer one-on-ones. Is there someone out there who would actually prefer playing a one-on-one over playing with a group?
And a group that works well.
A group that works well, right? If you have a disruptive player or a group that doesn't play well together, then I think that's when one-on-one also can fix that problem.
To continue the recap, we also talked about that's okay. We also talked about some general elements that you have to consider when doing one-on-one. So the planning tends to be deeper into one topic because there's only one person there and they have specialties usually that they're going to focus in on.
Another thing could be the stakes are usually higher. So as a game master, you have to control that a little bit, because being alone gives less less room for failure, I feel like, than if you have a whole group.
And then we talked about our 4 super cool ways to elevate your one-on-one games. The first one being just tailor it to the player. What they like as a player should be what the one-on-one session is mostly about.
Yeah, the second one is really about fleshing out the backstory of a character through knowledge or through NPCs that they can create, like bonds, like create a bond between the player and NPC in the story is,
and let them be part of that creation.
Yeah, because one-on-one is the opportunity to do it. Otherwise, the team will contribute to creating a character that should really be about that player.
Another one that I think we're both really excited about is giving secret information to that person in the one-on-one to then allow them to double reveal and give that information back to the party at a later date when it's appropriate. So you get this wow factor with the person one-on-one, and then you get the wow factor again when the person reveals that information to the rest of the party if they choose to do it. Hopefully they do. If not, there's another wow factor later where it's like, why didn't you say anything? But that's maybe another conversation.
Yeah, and the last one is really about giving time to shine to that character. We took a lot of example of splitting the party when you're actually using your abilities in a very specific way. The rogue is really a good example for that, and it's about giving the rogue the time to explore and maybe sneak in somewhere, and you don't have to cut all the time to go to the group. You can just go through it without making people wait. So that's a good way to do it.
And that covers everything this episode talked about. Like Chris said, if you really like one-on-ones, even more than you like playing as a group, we encourage you to let us know. You can comment below, or you can reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is roll_play_chat. You can also email us. Our email address is contactroleplaychat@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you have to say about one-on-ones or other tips and tricks that maybe we didn't consider in this video. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or in podcast land. It's always a pleasure. And I think that sums up our conversation for today, Chris.
That's all, Matt.
Let's call it a chat.